My name's Zach. I'm 24, just graduated last spring, and for the last 3 weeks I've been crashing at my friend Brandon's place while I figure out my next step. It was supposed to be temporary, a pit stop between college and whatever job or apartment I end up landing. Brandon's folks were generous about it, especially his mom, Heather. Generous but distant, or so I thought. Brandon worked nights at the bar downtown, so I usually had the place to myself during the day. Heather, a real estate consultant, often worked from home, but on calls, in meetings, in heels, and behind closed doors. She was sharp, perfect posture, dry humor, always put together. The kind of woman you notice before you even realize why. And lately, I had started noticing too much. It was a Wednesday morning, late September, one of those days where the sunlight feels filtered, lazy, like it doesn't care if you're awake or not. The house was quiet. Brandon had left early to help a buddy move, and I'd just finished a long run. Sweating, sore, I headed to the upstairs bathroom, the one off the hallway, not the one next to Heather's room. I figured it was safer, neutral ground. I left the door unlocked. That was my first mistake. The water was still running when I stepped out of the shower, steam curling into the corners of the mirror. I reached for the towel, rubbed it over my face and chest, and stepped onto the cool tile floor. I wasn't in a rush. I thought I was alone. Then the door creaked open. I froze mid-movement, towel at my waist, water dripping off my shoulder. Heather stepped in, not rushed, not panicked. She was holding something in her hand, a small white bottle. "I thought you might have used up the shampoo," she said, and then her eyes finally met mine. She didn't flinch. "You missed a spot." My body tensed. I wasn't sure what to cover first. My chest, the towel slipping low on my hips, or the look in my eyes. She looked calm, like she had rehearsed this moment. I thought you were in your office," I muttered, voice sharp with nerves. "I was," she replied, still not moving. "But the water was running for a while. I figured something was wrong. Or you were enjoying yourself too much." That line hung in the air like heat off pavement. Then, finally, she placed the bottle on the counter and turned to leave. Just before she closed the door, she added, "You really should lock it next time. Some people walk in without knocking." And just like that, she was gone. I stared at the door, heart hammering, my breath ragged. Every muscle in me was awake. That night, I tried to pretend nothing happened. Heather was back in her usual mode, neat, professional, making tea in the kitchen while scrolling through listings on her tablet. Brandon came home late and turned on the game. We didn't talk much, but I couldn't stop thinking about that moment. The next morning, I woke up to find a folded towel on the edge of the bathroom sink. Not mine. It smelled faintly of her perfume. The same citrus vanilla mix I'd caught when she leaned a little too close once to pass me the remote. That afternoon, I heard her on the phone. Her office door was open a crack. She was talking about an open house this Saturday. Said she'd be gone most of the day. Then she mentioned something else, that Brandon had picked up another shift this weekend. Friday and Saturday both. It wasn't what she said that mattered. It was how she said it, like she wanted someone to hear. Later that evening, Brandon tossed me his keys and said, "Hey, mind grabbing a case from the downstairs fridge? I think Mom's got company coming this weekend." I headed down. As I passed the hallway, I noticed something. The door to Heather's bathroom, the one next to her room, was open, light on, and a sound, faint, a slow drip of water into a full tub. She was in there. I should have kept walking. Instead, I stopped. The sound of water shifted. Then her voice, low and clear, drifted through the half-open door. "If you're going to hover, Zach, at least knock." I didn't move. Not yet. And the worst part? Neither did she. I backed away from the doorway before she could say anything else. My pulse was loud enough to drown out the water. I grabbed the case of beer from the downstairs fridge and tried to act normal when I returned to the living room, but my hands were shaking just enough that Brandon noticed. "You good?" he asked, glancing over. "Yeah, just tired." He shrugged, grabbed 2 bottles, and headed upstairs to change. I sat there for a moment, staring at the muted television, realizing how close I'd come to being seen where I shouldn't have been. Again. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. Lights were off, house quiet, but my mind was wide awake and locked on one thing. Heather had known I was there. She wasn't surprised. She was ready. The next morning, Brandon left early again. Something about helping a coworker set up for a weekend event. I lingered on the couch, pretending to scroll through job listings, but every sound from upstairs grabbed my attention. When Heather finally emerged, she wasn't dressed for work. Not businesslike at all. A soft, oversized sweater hung loose on her shoulders, dark leggings hugging her legs. Bare feet, hair not quite styled yet. She looked like she had nowhere to be, and all the time in the world to notice me. "Morning," she said, voice smooth like she'd already had 2 coffees. "Hey," I answered, sitting up straighter. Her eyes flicked toward the stairs. "Brandon's gone. Again." There was something intentional in that sentence. A door opening without being touched. She walked into the kitchen, and I followed, pretending it wasn't automatic. While she reached up to grab a mug, her sweater lifted just enough to show a curve of her lower back. I tore my gaze away before she noticed. Or maybe she already had. "I wanted to ask you something," she said, pouring tea. "Do you usually shower in the hall bathroom?" I swallowed, throat suddenly dry. Yeah. I figured the other one was off limits." She set the mug down. Hard. Porcelain clinked against granite. "It is." Silence. "But the kind that speaks." She stepped closer, leaning her hip against the counter. Close enough that her perfume brushed my senses again. "But you should really remember to lock doors. Someone might misunderstand." I didn't know what to say, so I didn't speak. We stood there in a pocket of stillness that felt much too small for 2 people with this many unspoken thoughts. Then it happened, a sound that changed everything. Footsteps. Heavy ones. Boot soles hitting wood floor from the entryway. Heather's eyes widened, not fear, but calculation. She grabbed my arm, and without warning, shoved me behind the pantry door just as the front door opened. "Mom? You home?" Brandon's voice echoed through the hall. Heather kept her body blocking the pantry, shielding me from view. Her voice turned light, casual. "In the kitchen. Didn't expect you back so soon." I felt my heart slam against my ribs. If Brandon came any closer, he'd see me instantly. The door wasn't fully closed. A thin line of light spilled through the crack, framing her silhouette. She was calm, dangerously calm, while I stood there, half breathing, waiting for everything to explode. "Forgot my charger," Brandon muttered, heading upstairs. "Be quick." We both waited until the steps faded. Heather exhaled slowly, then opened the pantry door. Her hand stayed on my arm longer than necessary. "That was close," she whispered. "We shouldn't," I started. She cut me off. "You're right. We shouldn't." But she didn't move away. On the kitchen island sat a small object I hadn't noticed before. A silver key, gleaming, familiar, too familiar. The same type as the one for the locked bathroom next to her room. She followed my gaze. "Keys open more than just doors, Zach." The air between us tightened again. She brushed past me, fingers grazing just enough to spark heat, and headed for the stairs. Before disappearing, she turned her head slightly. "If you really want privacy, the downstairs bathroom is safer." No one ever uses it. She paused, one last message in her tone. And if you forget the towel again. She let the sentence hang unfinished. That evening, I couldn't stop staring at that silver key in my memory. I shouldn't have cared. I shouldn't have wanted to know more. But I did. Later, when everyone should have been asleep, I slipped out of the guest room and moved quietly through the hallway. One wrong creak in the floorboards could ruin everything. I reached the top of the stairs and froze. Voices. Not Brandon. A man's voice. Deep, unfamiliar. Muted, but intense, coming from Heather's room. A visitor. Late. Too late for business. I leaned closer, trying to catch words. My elbow brushed a picture frame, knocking it the slightest bit off balance. The voices stopped, dead silent. Then the sound of footsteps approaching the door. I held my breath, caught, exposed, nowhere to hide. The door latch clicked. The door opened just wide enough for a figure to appear. Not Heather. A man stepped out, late 30s, maybe early 40s, wearing a navy suit and a Bluetooth earpiece still glowing faintly. His gaze locked on me instantly. He didn't blink, didn't speak. I straightened, hands at my sides like a kid caught where he shouldn't be. The hallway felt too narrow, the shadows too loud. Problem? He asked, voice flat. I was just heading to the bathroom, I said. My voice cracked slightly, not enough to scream guilt, but not confident either. He studied me for a beat longer than was comfortable. Then he stepped fully into the hallway, brushing his jacket straight. I could see a thick folder tucked under one arm. Legal documents, contracts, or something worse. Heather appeared behind him, robe tied neatly, hair now brushed and composed. Like this wasn't the middle of the night. Zach, she said with a faint smile. You remember Mark, my associate from the office. I nodded, trying to remember if I'd ever heard his name before. I hadn't. Mark glanced back at her. Didn't know you had a guest tonight. He's just staying until he gets settled, she replied smoothly. Brandon's friend. Mark gave me one last scan, as if mentally categorizing me. Then he stepped away, walking past me toward the stairs. Heather waited until his footsteps echoed lower, then spoke under her breath. You need to be more careful. You didn't tell me anyone was here. She leaned in. That's because you weren't supposed to be. A pause. Then something shifted in her eyes. Less caution, more challenge. She slipped something into my hand. The silver key. No words. No explanation. Just a glance that said, use it when you're ready. That night, I didn't sleep. The next morning, Brandon was all energy and questions about a concert coming up, about some girl he met, about whether I wanted to move into a 2-bedroom with him downtown. I nodded through it all, trying to focus, trying to stay on this side of the line. We ended up in the driveway, helping his uncle load furniture into a rental van. That's when Brandon's voice dropped to something quieter. My mom likes you, man, he said casually, wiping sweat off his neck. I mean, she's been different lately, weirdly relaxed. I didn't answer, just kept loading boxes, pretending my chest wasn't tightening. That evening, the house emptied again. Brandon had dinner plans. Heather claimed she was going to the office to sign paperwork. The moment she left, I took out the key. It was cool in my hand, heavier than I remembered. The hallway was dark, quiet. I made it to the door, her private bathroom, and slid the key into the lock. Click. The door opened without resistance. Inside, everything was still. The tub had been recently used. A folded towel rested neatly on the counter. And next to it, deliberate, perfectly placed, was a bar of soap. White, unscented, new, the same kind I used. This was no accident. But the stillness shattered with the sudden buzz of the house intercom. Someone was at the door. I jumped, heart racing. I rushed to the window overlooking the front porch. A man in a dark polo stood at the entrance, glancing down at his phone. He didn't look like a neighbor. He looked official. I crept downstairs just as Heather pulled into the driveway and approached him. I stayed behind the wall, hidden, listening. "Ms. Moore?" the man asked. "Yes. Sorry to drop in unannounced. We've had some flagged activity in your area. Security checks. Just routine. We noticed someone matching a trespasser description near the property yesterday. Young, dark hair, mid-20s. Heather didn't hesitate. "I have a house guest. My son's friend. He's been here all week." The man nodded, jotting something down. "Mind if we ask him a few questions?" Heather shifted her stance. Calm but firmer now. "He's not home. And unless there's a warrant, I don't think I owe you anything more." The man hesitated, just a flicker, then handed her a business card and left. She waited until his car turned the corner before closing the door, locking it firmly. Then she looked directly toward the hallway, toward me. "I told you to be careful." I stepped out, my voice tight. "Who was that?" "Someone who shouldn't be knocking at my door. He's not with the city." I swallowed. "He asked about me. And I covered for you." Again. I followed her into the kitchen. She set the card down. The name on it was generic, a security contractor. Maybe private. Maybe something worse. Heather didn't sit. She stood near the counter, arms crossed, watching me. "You have to decide, Zach," she said. "What are you doing here? Just staying? Or choosing?" I didn't speak. Just walked over to the kitchen drawer where the towels were kept. At the bottom was one I hadn't seen before. Pale gray, neatly folded. My name was embroidered faintly along the edge. Not printed. Stitched. I held it up, staring at it like it might burn. Heather stepped forward and took it from me, folding it gently in her hands. Her fingers brushed mine, slow, intentional. "Tomorrow," she whispered, "I won't be here, but the key will." The house was too quiet that night. Every floorboard spoke. Every shadow had a voice. And when I finally opened my bedroom door to check the hallway, to make sure I was alone, a small white box sat outside on the floor. Inside it, the key. I stared at the box on the floor for a long time before I picked it up. It wasn't sealed. Wasn't wrapped like a gift or hidden like a secret. Just waited. I brought it inside and closed the door. The key was there, just as she promised. Beneath it, a single folded note, the kind she always scribbled grocery reminders on. This one had just 3 words in clean, confident cursive. "If you're sure." No name, no time, no signature, just that quiet challenge. The rest of the day stretched slow. Brandon was out of the house again. Errands, plans, whatever excuse kept him moving. I didn't ask. I barely listened. All I could think about was the lock, the hallway, and whether I'd be crossing a line or admitting I already had. By late afternoon, I made my decision. I waited until I heard the garage door close. Heather's car pulling out, just like she said. Then I moved fast. Up the stairs, down the hall, past the guest room. The silver key was warm in my hand now, like it had been waiting too long. I opened the door to her private bathroom. Everything was exactly as I remembered, clean, organized, lightly scented like citrus and warmth. A towel lay across the counter, folded in a way that didn't feel accidental. Next to it, the same soap, still unused. I stepped inside, closed the door behind me, and locked it. And for the first time since I moved into this house, I turned on the water without checking who was around. It was quiet when I stepped out. Steam covered the mirror again, just like that morning, the first time she walked in. Only now there was no mistake, no accident, just silence, a waiting space, and something had changed. On the counter sat a new object, a razor. Silver, polished. Not hers. Not Brandon's. Mine. Placed beside the folded towel like it belonged here. Like I did. That night I dried off slowly. Deliberately. I looked at my reflection through the fog and waited, half expecting the door to open. But it didn't. She'd given me space. She'd given me the choice. I left the bathroom door unlocked when I returned to the guest room. That was the choice I made. In the weeks that followed, things didn't explode. There was no dramatic fallout, no confrontation, but everything shifted. Heather and I moved in a rhythm now, a quiet one. Glances across the kitchen, a pause longer than necessary on the staircase. She started leaving things in plain sight. A folded napkin by my coffee cup with her lipstick smudge on it. A second toothbrush that wasn't Brandon's. One night, I stayed late in the living room after Brandon fell asleep on the couch. I was pretending to watch something, anything, just to stay a little longer in that space. Heather passed behind me, brushing her fingers lightly across my shoulder. Nothing more. No words. But I didn't move. That became our ritual. Quiet signals. Soft traces. Nothing anyone else would catch, but I always did. The silver key now lived in my pocket. Sometimes I didn't use it for days. Sometimes she left the door slightly ajar before stepping into the tub, knowing I'd find it like that, knowing I'd understand. The security guy never came back. Or maybe Heather made sure of it. Either way, we never spoke of him again. Brandon never noticed, or he chose not to. I got a job offer 2 towns over. Heather heard me talking about it on the phone and didn't say anything. Not until I hung up. She looked at me from the edge of the hallway, arms folded, the faintest shadow of a smile in her expression. "I won't stop you," she said. I nodded. "I didn't ask you to." Another pause. Then she stepped forward and pressed something into my palm. A second key. "I figured you'd lose the first one eventually." We didn't say goodbye when I left. Just a glance in the mirror near the front door. Me looking back at her as I stepped outside. Both of us holding more than we ever said out loud. Now, when I visit, sometimes for the weekend, sometimes just passing through, the routine is always the same. The towel's already out. The door's unlocked. And her voice, from behind the hallway wall, always the same 3 words. "You missed a spot."